I asked you how to be happy, you would have a hard time coming up with an answer. By its nature, the question is too vague, too broad. Dr. James Patterson, the writer of the book How to Be Miserable, recognized this conflict and proposed a solution. By asking yourself how to be unhappy instead of how to be happy, you can pinpoint exactly what is making you sad and avoid doing it, so that you can eventually reach happiness. I believe success and happiness are quite interlinked. And when I was chosen to do this TED Talk here, I was mortified. Not because of the TED Talk itself, but because my subject was success. And I didn't know what success meant to me. And I felt like a fraud talking about something while I myself wasn't sure. So I decided to talk about something that I know I am really familiar with. That is failure. I have failed, like many of you, and like many of us. And I think my first failure was when I was 12. So there was this contest, short story contest. And I had written an assignment for my literature class back in Turkish. And it was sent to the contest, and I got an award. It wasn't the Oscar, of course, but it felt like the Oscar. I felt extremely special. My parents started complimenting me on my writing skills, and so did my teachers, and so did my friends. And I wasn't even aware of these skills. I felt gloriful, like Melis talked about in the last presentation. I felt like I was the most special person on the earth. And being called the writer of the family, of the class, being called the writer felt good. So I decided to adopt the label myself, and I started introducing myself as a writer when I met someone new. I took pride in my own talents, and I believed that I was gifted, that they were inborn, and it probably had to do with my mom, because she is into philosophy. But there was a problem. The problem was, my friends, who were really supportive of me, asked to read my work. And I didn't want them to. It is kind of counterintuitive, right? Because I was proud of being a writer, but I didn't want people to read what I wrote. The reason why was there was nothing to read. Seriously, nothing. I would write nothing while calling myself a writer. The reason was I opened the Word document, or I took the pen and the paper, and I tried to write something, but I just couldn't put the words into the page. I was mortified. And if I actually forced myself to put the words and start writing myself, and after I read the thing I wrote, I was always disappointed. What I wrote was never good enough. I always perceived it as bad. It never compared to what I read in other authors and what I imagined itself to be. In my mind, it was great, but when it was on the paper, it wasn't. And I was so disappointed in myself. I started questioning, well, my teachers call me a writer, my parents call me a writer, my friends say that they are jealous because of my writing skills while they don't have it. But I can't write, it's just not good. And I started questioning myself and who I was. Because I was told to be a writer, so what writers do is to write good stuff. And if I couldn't write good stuff, then I wasn't a writer. And I couldn't stand the possibility of me not being a writer. It was my identity at that point. It was what made me special. So I took a shortcut. I decided that I wasn't going to write anything. Because if I didn't write anything, I couldn't write anything bad. And that gave me the permission to call myself a writer while not actually being a one. I was kind of being lazy, to be honest with you. And I don't think I'm alone at this. I think we avoid the things we want to do. Wait, wait, what? Oh, sorry. How many of you avoided doing something that you loved because you were afraid you were going to fail? Hands? I see a lot of hands. We, most of the time, are afraid to do the things we want to do because we're afraid we won't live up to our expectations. This is called approach avoidance conflict in psychology, also known as avoidance theory, is when we love to do something, but we also hate to do it because we are afraid. But what is the reason? We believe that if we are not as good of a writer as we are, that we are not, then that must mean that we are not talented. And that must mean that we are not as special as we thought we were. So why do we think, why are we so obsessed with being special? It has to do with our desire to be loved. All humans have the desire to be loved, and all of them want to be loved in some shape or form. The thing is, we live with ourselves, and we see every aspect of ourselves. And we see our imperfections, we see our flaws. We see our face without any makeup. And we see our jokes that nobody laughs. And our bursts of anger for no good reason. These are all the things that we are embarrassed about. We don't want to have those qualities, yet we still do. We can't just give them up, because they're a part of us. And we start feeling insecure, because we are worried that if we have those qualities, if we have those bad aspects of us, those flaws, then people won't love us. And we seek to be loved more than anything. We want to be appreciated. This is just a quote from my favorite poets. Oh God, I'm sorry. I'm so imperfect. Can you really love me when my soul is deformed? Will you love me anyhow? We are afraid that the society and everyone around us will stop loving us because we will show them that we're not talented, we're not intelligent, we're not a writer. We worry that they will stop loving us and stop appreciating us. So what we do, we try to avoid that. We try to avoid feeling those feelings. We get obsessed with the talent. We get obsessed with the labels we give ourselves. And we seek to prove to ourselves and to others that we are somehow valuable, that we are worth the love. So in order to prove that, we seek some sort of validation. The need for validation is actually one of the reasons why social media is so common. Because getting likes on an Instagram picture shows that people actually think that you are doing okay. That you're worthy of living in this planet, and you actually contribute something. Getting likes show that you're worthy of love. So we just crave for more and more validation. But there is also other ways we try to prove ourselves. And the best way for that, I think a lot of us believe, is through success. And when we think of success, we try to find a few ways on how to succeed and reach the success. The first way is to choose the safe option. The first way is choose a dream that is already approved by the society. So what does that mean? So I told you that we want to be approved by the society, right? And we see some people who are already approved by the society, already appreciated by the society and respected. Who are they? Doctors, a lot. Politicians, lawyers, engineers. I'm pretty sure, like in the school, most of the students are asked the question, what do you want to be when you grow up? And if you say something except those 4 or 3 jobs, you're getting the look, is that so? I wouldn't do it if I were in your place. Choose a real job. I mean, I experienced people telling me this, and I'm pretty sure most of the students here did as well. There's a problem with this, though. So let's say you want to be a doctor because you know that it will get you respect and people will value your work. So what do you do? So you put your mind into becoming a doctor, you study for the YGS or whatever it's called now. You study every day, cram, and You actually succeed in getting a medicine school, and you continue studying, and after like maybe 15 years, you're finally a doctor. And then you're technically successful, right? Because you succeeded the dream of becoming a doctor. The problem is, maybe you didn't want to be a doctor. Maybe you wanted to be a dancer, or a cook, or hell, even an engineer. Maybe you wanted something other than that, but you just chose the safe option because you knew that you would be appreciated that way. Is that really success? To succeed in someone else's dream? Technically, from a stranger's point of view, you succeeded, but you don't feel fulfilled because you didn't succeed in your own dream. So this was the first way of how we fail. We try to adapt someone else's dream to us. And even if we succeed at that, it can't be considered a success. But if you're past that point, and if you actually chose something you enjoyed, then you try to pick the second option, which is, which is to choose your own dream, decide on what you want to be, and then try to gain validation to that dream, which was what I did with writing. So I wanted to be a writer. And I wanted to gain validation. So people were complimenting me on my writing skills, and I really wanted to believe in them. But when I wrote actually anything, I was faced with the reality that I wasn't as good as other people said, or as I wanted to believe. And there is a pressure, because since our parents and our teachers and everyone around us compliments us, we want to live up to their expectations. And as a result, we get extremely nervous and anxious, which was why I quitted writing, because I was so anxious that it would be a fail. We start to fear failure. We start to avoid failure like plague. But failure is not a bad thing. Let me show you something. In a research conducted at the University of California, Berkeley, it was discovered that 91% of the undergraduate students, 91, committing suicide had above average grades. They were successful people. They were successful students and successful, they were called intelligence, I'm sure. But they still had the pressure, and they just couldn't stand it. They took the shortcut. And was this a success to you? Because for me, it's not. They were told to be successful, and people told them that you're going to be successful. So when they faced with the tiniest bit of failure, instead of working hard and beating it, they just quit it, because they couldn't bear the feeling of not being what they thought they were. So the second way of how we fail is we are so afraid of failure that we never try. The problem is, when we never try, we never learn. We never learn from our failures. Failures, we think, are a bad thing. Well, it couldn't be further away from truth. Failures are a teacher, our teachers. And they teach us to grow, to persist on our dreams, to try again. It shows us what we did wrong, and it tells us to try harder. We sometimes don't like that. I sure didn't like writing something on the paper and not liking it, but I had to continue. Because the only way of beating this next way of failure, is through embracing failure. How do we do that? So I believed I was a writer, right? And those students in Berkeley believed they were intelligent students. And when they were faced with a failure, they started doubting themselves and their identities. When they failed, their identity was stripped away from them, because they started believing, if I'm not as intelligent, or if I'm not as good of a writer I thought to be, then what is my value in this world? And why do I deserve to live here? But if we, instead of complimenting them on their talents, if we could compliment them on their hard work, they would know that failure is a teacher. And when they were faced with a failure, instead of just quitting, they would try again, and try again, and try again, and learn. And learn, and grow. And when they growed, they would learn how to beat the obstacle, whatever it is that they faced. If I continue to write, eventually I would have gotten better at writing. And if I didn't believe I was special from the beginning, if I believed, well, I'm pretty average, but if I can learn and grow, I can become exceptional one day. The problem is, we think if we're not born exceptional, that we will never be. But that couldn't be further away from truth. As Winston Churchill says here, and as I want to say it in simpler words, success is not something you are given to. Success is something you earn. Thank you.